I've covered a whole host of topics and individuals on this YouTube channel ever since I started it around 4 years ago. However, there's been a bit of a trend on my channel in that there are certain people that I just can't help but cover multiple times, and there are many reasons for that. First and foremost is that I find the people that I cover multiple times more fascinating more often than other people that I just do one-off videos on. For instance, let's take the Young Turks, somebody that I've made a couple of video responses to, an organization that has appeared a little bit often on my channel, you could say the least. I don't know what I'm gonna get from the Young Turks. Well, actually, I do know what I'm gonna get from the Young Turks, but still, after all these years, I'm not exactly sure why I'm consistently getting what I'm getting from the Young Turks, and I've broken it down to a couple of explanations. The first is that the people at the Young Turks are just not that bright. They don't know the information that they speak to with the air of expertise, and therefore they're often inadvertently completely wrong and buffoonishly so. And while I think that's true some of the time, there's also other explanations. Number two, they just don't tell the truth. They specifically highlight and lie about stories to promote their own narrative, and while that is true to a certain extent, it's not the full explanation. The third thing that I've come to the conclusion must be a part of this equation is the fact that sometimes they just get demented about certain topics. This is the only explanation for why they consistently repeat irrelevant information about these topics as if it's damning. There's no real reason when confronted multiple times with information that deliberately points out how dumb what you're saying is for you to continue doing that. But the Young Turks have a number of talking points that they just repeat even though they've been shot down multiple times as completely irrelevant. But honestly, that's the little long-winded intro. I'm not going to spend too much time explaining this. We're just going to use an example, and I'm going to try to show you where I think the Young Turks are being dishonest, where I think that they are just highlighting and cherry-picking something because they're not that bright, and where I think that they're bordering on dementia. Starting with this video. But first, subscriber glitch. Yes, I know this YouTube stuff really annoying. I know you don't care about the housekeeping, but I'm losing like 50 subscribers or so like 2 days after I upload a video. It's really annoying. There's no real reason for it. So if you find yourself unsubscribed from the channel, just remember to resubscribe. Check it every now and again. I upload like 10 to 12 videos a month. That's it. We're not staying on this topic anymore. Let's get into the Young Turks video.
A sheriff's deputy shot and killed a black man as he was entering his own home in Columbus, Ohio.
So it needs to be pointed out that this is the cherry picking that the Young Turks do. They are only covering this story because the person who was shot by the police officer in this instance happens to be black. The reason I know that the Young Turks go out of their way to cherry pick these stories is because being shot by the police is something that happens twice as often to white people in the United States of America than they do black, but judging by the Young Turks and the way that they do their videos, you would think it almost never happens to a white person. So this is cherry picking just to start out the video, and Anna telling you the only reason at all that they're interested in covering this story.
Casey Goodson allegedly looked suspicious to the sheriff's deputy. His name is Jason Mead. So he followed the 23-year-old as he was attempting to open his front door and enter his home. At that point, the sheriff's deputy, Mead, opened fire and shot and killed Casey Goodson. There is absolutely no indication that he engaged in any kind of altercation with the sheriff's deputy.
Now, I know this is going to shock you guys because Anna Kasparian is a pillar of honesty as shown by the many videos on my channel, but Anna is actually lying there. She's both lying by omission and directly lying when she says that Mead was following Casey Goodson because he looked suspicious.
You know, he wasn't even alleged to be committing a crime at that time when he was shot. Nothing. This sheriff's deputy just alleged that, he looked a little suspicious.
Yeah, gee, I wonder why he thought he looked suspicious.
And by suspicious, Anna Kasparian is saying not white, therefore Mead was following him because he was black, therefore this is a racially targeted hate crime from the officer against Casey Goodson Jr. However, the reason that Casey was being followed by Jason Mead is because when Mead was wrapping up some other work that he was doing, he got reports of somebody matching Casey's description waving around a firearm. He then followed him to his residence, and according to witnesses that heard, there was a verbal exchange in which Mead says he told him to drop the gun, and he didn't drop the gun, and thus Mead shot Casey. Now, Casey did have a firearm on him, and what really will be determining whether or not this is a good shoot or a bad shoot is whether or not that firearm was holstered or was out when the officer drew the gun and ultimately fired on Casey. The officer says clearly he did not mistake the Subway sandwich that was on this young man for a firearm. That did not happen. Call me crazy, but when an officer says that he's following somebody who matches the description of somebody else who is waving around a gun in the same area, and then he confronts that person, and that person does have a gun on him, I think that the officer's story makes sense, at least on a superficial level. Now, I do leave room for this to be a bad shooting, and I'll tell you exactly what would make this a bad shooting, or at least heavily lean the evidence toward this being a bad shooting, and that is the position of the gun that Casey had on him, that is indisputable that he had on him at the time of the shooting. If the gun is out, then this could be an instance where even if Casey wasn't doing anything wrong, where he heard somebody coming up on him, he drew his gun, the cop ordered him to drop it, but things went crazy in the time period that was allotted, and he ended up getting shot and killed inside of his own home. Now, what I just described to you in my mind, based on the limited evidence that is available to the public right now, is definitely a possibility. It would be a tragedy, it would be a wrongful death, it probably wouldn't rise to the level of criminality on behalf of the officer, but it would lead to a giant civil suit because it would be a tragic wrongful death case. That's the reasonable approach that you would bring to covering this, by the way, when you don't have all the information. But let's see how the Young Turks are going to go about covering this.
Armed protesters showed up in front of the house of the Michigan Secretary of State. They also she's a Democrat, and they also showed up in front of the house of the Speaker of the House in Pennsylvania. He's a Republican, but they came armed. Now, I presume some of them are licensed to carry that. I hope so. None of them got shot by the cops. The cops saw that and they're like, "Oh, you're here to threaten public officials with your weapons. Totally fine. You got your Second Amendment rights. Go ahead and try to bully them, intimidate them. Their kids are in the house. Have at it, Hoss. Right? No problem at all. You got your Second Amendment rights. Oh, black guy with a Subway sandwich. Shoot him. He's going into his own house. He put a key in the door, thereby indicating he owns the house. Shoot him and kill him, just in case. Just in case. Well, what happened to his Second Amendment rights? Oh no, he's black. No, he's got a Second Amendment right to die."
So I've made it clear in the past that you shouldn't show up on, near, around any person's house that is a public figure because you disagree with them publicly. However, there is a distinction between somebody that the police stopped because they suspected him specifically of waving around a gun, and that person may be drawing a gun in that scenario on the officer and getting shot, and people showing up and open carrying in an open carry state doing a protest. One is super common in public, has nothing to do with race. Here's a perfect example of a bunch of black people in the United States of America doing it, nobody getting shot, except for maybe accidental shootings because there might have been some incompetence handling those weapons, and it's not a big deal. Cenk, your conflation of these two things is ridiculous, and you're ridiculous because I know where you're going with this, and I'm just gonna play the video so people can see it.
Oh, black guy with a Subway sandwich. Shoot him. He's going into his own house. He put a key in the door, thereby indicating he owns the house. Shoot him and kill him, just in case. Just in case. Well, what happened to his Second Amendment rights? Oh no, he's black. No, he's got a Second Amendment right to die.
Cenk, just like Jussie Smollett was not attacked holding a Subway sandwich, this guy was not shot because he was holding a Subway sandwich. And the key in the door indicating that he lived there has nothing to do with anything. This is what happens, by the way, when you lie by omission about the reason that the officer was following him. The officer did not suspect he was breaking into this home. That was never reported anywhere. The Young Turks, and Cenk specifically, is just lying about this because they were lying about why the officer was following this person in the first place. So they have to come up with a ridiculous reason. They never once under any circumstances said that he didn't live there or that was the reason why the officer confronted him for going up to this door. He confronted him again because there was a report of somebody matching this description waving around a gun. This guy had a gun on him, so it seems to align, at least again, logically, let the investigation play out with the facts of the case. Cenk, again, just making up complete nonsense here.
No, it is pretty incredible because, I mean, if a 17-year-old crosses state lines with an illegal weapon.
Oh yeah, I know you guys know where this is going. Crosses state lines, Kyle Rittenhouse is coming up. How demented do you have to be if you're Ana Kasparian still talking about Kyle Rittenhouse crossing state lines? Once again, and if I can make this as clear as humanly possible, crossing state lines with a firearm in and of itself is not a crime. Every time Ana Kasparian says Kyle Rittenhouse crossed state lines, what she's saying is that she doesn't know anything about this case, and here's some irrelevant information that sounds scary if you're as ignorant as Ana Kasparian. By the way, this guy was crossing the threshold of his own home. Is that illegal on its own? No, not at all, but it did happen, and he did cross the threshold. He probably crossed the street. He probably crossed the threshold of a Subway in order to get the Subway sandwich. You know what I thought? Kyle Rittenhouse might have crossed a couple of streets. You know, he crossed street lines. He might have crossed some avenues. He might have crisscrossed his legs. He might have played tic-tac-toe where he was X's, so he's making crosses on a map. These are all completely irrelevant things, just like Kyle Rittenhouse crossing state lines would be completely irrelevant to anything having to do with his case. But go on, Anna.
And then proceeds to shoot and kill 2 protesters. Well, then he's an American hero, and the cops will let him go home that night and then turn himself in later.
Now you might be thinking to yourself, there's no way Ana Kasparian just said that, and I assure you, she did. That is an actual thing that came out of this woman's mouth. Let's just set aside the fact that Ana Kasparian kind of skipped a few steps between Kyle Rittenhouse ending up in Kenosha and shooting 2 people. Like, you know, she skipped the whole thing about each of those 2 people attacking him unambiguously on video in the most open and shut self-defense case ever. And let's move on to the fact that Ana Kasparian said that the police in Kenosha, Wisconsin let Kyle Rittenhouse go home. Meaning, in Ana Kasparian's mind, because Kyle Rittenhouse was white, the police knew he was the shooter and let him go on purpose because they agreed that white people should be able to murder other white people. That's what Ana Kasparian is saying. That's the level of lies that are acceptable at the Young Turks. That's the level of anti-police propaganda that TYT pushes. Remember, TYT has actually literally inspired people to go kill cops in the past.
And I'm specifically talking about Kyle Rittenhouse, who opened fire on protesters, killing 2 and injuring 1 other in Kenosha, Wisconsin. But when it comes to a Black individual who's not committing a crime, who has an absolutely squeaky clean record, who has a license to carry a concealed weapon, no, but he looks suspicious, so let me open fire as he's putting the keys in his door.
And now you can understand why people in their audience that are too dumb to realize that Anna is demented and lying to them were inspired to commit acts of violence. Because if you believe that, based on what Ana Kasparian is saying, those open, brazen lies that have no rooting in truth whatsoever, you might get angry and you might seek to go out and attack people.
And a great point on Rittenhouse. I hadn't thought of it quite that way. In his case, he wasn't even doing it the legal way. And then he murdered people with it. And they let him go. They finally arrest him because, golly gee, I guess we got to go arrest this guy. And they let him go. They finally arrest him because, golly gee, I guess we got to go arrest this guy.
This is how dementia gets perpetuated on the Young Turks. Anna says something ridiculous, something insane, something completely untrue and baseless, something meant to stir up hatred in her own audience, something that has had unbelievable negative consequences, specifically in reference to police in the past, directly from people inspired by the Young Turks, and Cenk just doubles down on it like it's a fact. The police did not in any way, shape, or form let Kyle Rittenhouse go. Let me explain to you what happened once again so you know this 100% clearly. Kyle Rittenhouse completely on video, 100% acted in self-defense. Anybody who disputes this didn't watch the video or is a liar. The Young Turks have seen the video. They are lying about this because they are liars. Then, after defending himself, Rittenhouse went to go turn himself in. Here is a photo of him unambiguously surrendering to the police. However, there were multiple gunshots still being fired around the area where the police were heading, so they assumed that Rittenhouse was just doing what all of these other militia guys do when they come up on the police, and showing them that his hands aren't on the gun and he's not the shooter. That's why they drove past Kyle Rittenhouse. However, when Rittenhouse was found out to have been the shooter, even though it is clear and unambiguous that he 100% acted in self-defense, they still completely overcharged him, set an insane $2 million bail on him, even though, again, what he did was in no way, shape, or form illegal and is 100% covered by Wisconsin state self-defense law. So the police didn't say, oh, I guess we have to go get him, or whatever Cenk is saying, because they were on his side because he was white. Rittenhouse is being screwed over by the system, even though he unambiguously defended himself, and he's being crushed because the political left has decided to target this 17-year-old kid. There is no dispute that under Wisconsin law, once again, Rittenhouse was 100% justified. That's why Anna Kasparian just has to vomit up cross state lines as if that means anything, and they have to skip all of the steps that led to Rittenhouse defending himself, so it looks like Kyle Rittenhouse murdered people. Kyle Rittenhouse murdered 0 people. Do you understand?
Authorities showed up, the keys were still in the door.
Yeah.
It's
well,
just,
if you're a detective, that's a pretty good clue that you shouldn't shoot the guy because it's his place.
Cenk, what the hell are you talking about? Again, show me anywhere, any statement, not you just making stuff up and mischaracterizing people you don't like and imagining things to be that definitely never happened nor were ever claimed, where Jason Meade or his attorneys say that they shot Casey because they thought he was breaking into this home. That was never alleged in any court documents and any paperwork whatsoever. I told you the specific reason why Jason Meade says that he shot this young man, but Cenk just doesn't want to talk about it. He just wants to make nonsense up and say that he was shot because he was black.
The Ohio Bureau of Investigation has actually rejected the case because the case wasn't brought to them until 3 days after the shooting took place. They said, quote, "We received a referral to take a 3-day-old officer-involved shooting case, not knowing all the reasons as to why so much time has passed before the case was referred to BCI. We cannot accept this case."
Now, Cenk and Anna go on to tell you how an agency wouldn't break protocol in order to investigate this shooting because they typically don't take cases more than a couple of hours after the initial incident, and they're going to tell it to you as if nobody's conducting an investigation whatsoever. Of course, what they are omitting is that another agency's taking this up. It's just that this specific agency that it was referred to doesn't want to take it up and break protocol in order to do so. By the way, had this agency actually taken this case and then they discovered that the officer was telling the truth in his version of events, they would talk nonstop about how suspicious it was that this agency broke their normal protocol in order to investigate it and imply some kind of conspiracy behind it, and that's the reason, not any of the forensic evidence, that they came to the judgment that they ended up coming to.
They claim BCI has an existing memorandum of understanding with the Columbus Police Department. As they know, the BCI is their first call when an incident occurs. BCI is the first call because we cannot be the subject matter experts unless we're on the scene from the beginning to document the evidence of what happened from the start. 3 days later, after the crime scene has been dismantled and the witnesses have all dispersed, does not work.
Let me just say, I don't believe a word of it. Hey, look at that. A cop caught a lucky break. Golly gee, we just can't investigate him. When Trump files lawsuits 30 days too late, or in Pennsylvania, a year too late, they're like, oh yeah, I mean, what's the big deal about the time and stuff? Oh, cop shot and killed someone? Oh, you missed it by 13 seconds. And the other police departments did refer to the other investigative division in time. What a coincidence. and yet another lucky break for cops.
So it's kind of a double-edged sword in that the Young Turks are going to go out of their way to lie about this agency, whether they would have taken the case or not taken the case, because that's what they do for a living. And don't be confused by their righteous indignation sounding words like they actually have anything to be righteous or indignant about. They're just dishonest liars who, again, are so demented they can't help but bring up and lie about a 17-year-old kid and talk about how he was privileged by a system that is clearly prosecuting him due to political purposes. Enough is enough. Stop trying to inspire hatred of cops, Young Turks. Stop lying, stop misleading, and try actually reading the basic facts so far as we know them about any of the cases that you talk about. Now, unlike the Young Turks, when more information comes out about this case, which it definitely will, I will deliver you that additional information without any spin or without any tilt to try to promote what you guys believe to be is my political agenda. If this is a bad shoot, if it's one of those rare cases, the double unicorn of the bad police shooting, I will tell you about it. If it's not, I will also tell you about it. But we know for a fact that no matter what, the Young Turks will continue to lie about this case because that's who they are. But hey, those are just my thoughts. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments below. If you like this video, then please show me by leaving a like. You can subscribe for more content. Follow me on all my social medias. You can support me via the support links in the description of this video. This has been me talking about the Young Turks lying about multiple cases due to dementia, dishonesty, or political bias. You decide. Till next time.